Greetings my guzzlers, welcome to 1390 England, and I want to cook a dish just for you that is typical of what we eat if we're nobility at this time. Supping on a nice wine, because like I said, we're nobility, we're gonna have meat. Now, don't tell anybody, because venison, actually this is beef, but even that, it's only for the nobles. Us poor folk, if we had a cow, we don't want to get them bloody killing the bleeding thing. We can get other things from it. So we don't kill it and eat it. But if them lords and ladies, they want to have their beef, they can have their beef, they can have their own cows and slaughter them, or they can have venison. Couldn't get any venison, so we've got beef. And I'll tell you why in a bit. But I've got 500 grams, and you might think, hey, what's this grams? It's 1390. So I'll tell you about that. So we've got about 500 grams of freshly slaughtered beef. You can do it with venison if you can get it, or you can even use pig meat. But there you go. Now, like I said, a 1390-ish recipe, Bruet Sarcenes, or rather, the sarcene is a sauce. It's meat in a sarcene sauce, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. So, before I tell you about everything else I've got here, we need to cook our meat. So, you're going to need a pot or a pan that you can put your meat into. Okay, and I'll just flatten it down, because the next thing I want to do is I want to cover it in water. Okay, now we're going to boil this meat. Okay, when we finish boiling it, the broth that we're making, we're going to want to keep back, because we're going to use that to make one of the other ingredients that makes the sauce. So I'm going to end up with more broth than I really need, but the trick here is to make sure you've covered your meat. Get your meat covered in the water. Okay, which that now is. And what I'm now going to do is I want to boil the bugger. So you put it on your fire. Okay, and then we want to boil it up until the meat is tender. Now, the only other thing, or things, that we're going to need is a smallish onion. Okay. You're going to want some wine. In this case, 60 mils of wine, so it's a waste to open a bottle, isn't it? Because it's expensive stuff, isn't it? Imported from France. Well, that one ain't, but that's imported from a country we haven't discovered yet in 1390. It's Australia. Hey? What's Australia? Don't know, because we ain't discovered it yet. You want 60 ml of that. You want about 5 grams of sugar. About 65 grams of rice flour. Before you go at 1390, what you doing with rice flour? And then we want some long pepper, some ground cinnamon, some ground nutmeg, some ground ginger, some cloves, which we've got to grind up, and some mace, which we've got to grind up. And then you want, I don't want any of them, they're stacks. about 60 grams of ground almonds, because we're going to make almond milk. But for now, we want to get that boiling, and we want to boil that until that meat is nice and tender. So while it's doing that, I'll tell you about the official recipe, and I'll tell you about the stuff that goes in it, and I'll explain why I'm using these weird measurements. I've been visited by an angel. Well, he said he weren't an angel. He said his name was Marty. I think he might have been the angel Marty. But he told me things that are to come. He also told me things that he must be an angel, because he knew things about me. And he's told me things about the future. But he had to nip off because he said, I've got to get back to the future. But he has popped back since and told me a few other things, and I'm going to tell you about them. And one of them was why we use these weird measurements. Right, in me mortar and pestle, I can never remember which one's which. I think I'm going to put, I want a bit of snack. I want about half a teaspoon in the end of ground cloves. Okay. Now, this dish is full of exotic spices and flavours from like the eastern regions, Middle Eastern regions, or even a bit further than the Middle East. Hence the name Sarcenes. You're also going to want about the same amount again of ground mace. Now, if you didn't know it, mace is the bit that grows around the nutmeg. And we want, so I've already got that ground, but I'm going to put that in there as well. About half a teaspoon of that. Half a teaspoon of ground ginger, or actual ginger, it's up to you. What else have I put in there? Well, I said cinnamon, ground ginger. Did I say nutmeg? Well, there's nutmeg and the cinnamon. Okay, in goes that. Then you want some long pepper. If you can't get long pepper, you can just ordinarily use black pepper. In that goes. That's it. Some of the snacks. By the way, my snacks, you might have suddenly think, you greedy bastard, just now you spoke to me and that was full. The wife come and nicked them all. So what we want to do is we just want to pound all these spices together. So part of the reason this is called Bruet Sarcenes, or Sarcenes, or Sarcenes, is because two reasons. Yeah. A bit of mace just flew out. Expensive stuff, mace. This is all expensive dish. It's quite for the nobles. But the name Sarcenes, or Sarcenes, it basically is derived from Saracens. And sort of Saracens conjure up these flavours and exotic spices from the east. But also, what the fuck? Bloody SIDS are falling apart. Bloody wash them then. Let's go there. So obviously, you're talking about like the Crusades across the Holy Land, and part of that, obviously, they come across the Saracens, and you know, Muslim culture, and we'd never met people like that before, and so people got the impression that if you were a Saracen, you were sort of a reddy brown colour. And it's sort of associated these Arabian peoples with sort of darker, reddy sort of brownish skin. And so the other reason this is called Sarcene sauce is because they coloured it sort of reddy colour. Now to do that they used something that Marty said to me, fuck's sake, don't use that anymore. He said, I know that's what you've been using. He said, but you mustn't use it. Alekenet. That was the go-to thing to add red to dishes. But he said, in the future, big organisation called the EU, European Union, they will say it is not safe. It will harm your body. It will affect your humours. They will say we no longer call it alekenet, we call it E103. And they said we will put it in cosmetics, products that women smatter all over their face. They will smear their lips in this thing called lipstick, and they want it nice and red, and they will use alekenet, and that's fine. But the great EU will say, do not eat it anymore. It is harmful, or will be harmful to your humans. So he said to me, I'm not allowed to use it. So I'm going to use a red colouring instead. Right, so that's my spices all ground together. I'm going to put that to one side. Have a swig, and then actually I might tell you the recipe, the official recipe, in 1390-ish language, and then we'll chop our onion up. Now you can see I'm not noble, but I'm well versed in reading, so I'm going to read to you the recipe. Bruet Sarcenes. Take venyson, boil it, try it, do it in a pot. Take almond milk, drawn up with the same broth. Cast theryn onions, and aley hit up with floure of rice, and cast in colours. After the boiling, take hit doun. Season hit up with poudyr, withe and sygure, and colour hit with alekenet. So there you go, typical 1390 recipe. How do I know what fucking amount to use of everything? Well, basically it was assumed you knew. Okay, but basically what that translates as, because I've got to translate it for you future people, Marty said, I can't do everything in Old English. People won't have a clue what I'm talking about. And he said, you can't talk about your pounds and things like that. People don't do that in the future. He said, they've gone metric. So he said, that's 500 grams of meat. So, Marty's an angel, so I have to believe him. I mean, I did go and see the local priest, and I said to him, this angel came to me, he said, don't talk bollocks. Angels wouldn't come and see the likes of you. I said, he said he was called Marty, and he said he came from the future to educate me. And they said, if it was anything like that, it'd be a bloody demon. No bloody angel's going to come and see you. But anyway, what Marty said that all meant in English, well, New English, not Old English. Take venison, boil it, drain it, place it in a pot. Take almond milk made from the broth, add onions and thicken it with rice flour, and add cloves. Bring to a boil, then remove from heat, season with powder, wine and sugar, and colour it red. Now by powder they mean that spice mix we just ground up. Okay, so let's chop the onion. So, oh, a bit of peel on that soon. He also told me, he said, you must keep all your peelings. Don't throw them in the garbage. Well, we didn't call it garbage in, did we? Just don't throw it in the street. It needs to be collected. And it must be separated from your other rubbish. So I've got a special bin he gave me there. He said you're going to have to wait like 1,000 years or more. He said before any bugger will come and empty it. But he said that's the thing you got to do now. But anyway, I said, well, can't I just chuck it in the garden like I used to do? And let it rot down. And he said, oh no, you can't do. Well, you can do that, he said. But he said, if you ain't going to do that, you've got to do that. Anyway, I'm digressing. So, I'm just going to finely chop up my onion. Okay. Oh, I should have said, by the way, the meat. My meat was already cut up into like bite-sized chunks. But if it ain't, if it's like, you know, if your lord's chucked a deer at you and said, there you go, make me a Bruet Sarcenes, you obviously got to cut the meat up. So you want to cut it into bite-sized chunks, okay? Because that's how we're going to eat it. Now, this is it really now, with the preparation. So I've got this onion, nicely sliced. Like I said, it was about one smallish onion. Okay, chuck that in there, get rid of that, put the lid down, keep flies away. Apparently Marty said keep flies off everything. It's not healthy. Gets protein in it, but he said no. The shit eaters, the contaminators. Keep your lid on your food bin. So, really, apart from eating my snack, and decide what I'm going to do because I'm almost out of wine, just wait for that to boil. Like I say, we want that boiling, and then when it carry on boiling, if you want time to time, you can scrape the scum off the top. Okay, but we want that boiling, and we want that meat cooked so it's nice and tender, because it's going in the sauce. But we're not going to cook it in the sauce. We're just going to cook the meat, so coat the meat, so the meat needs to be cooked and ready to eat. Now, Marty said, got to show you that. Something about telling you to like and subscribe. So I'll leave you that. You can put that over there. But I thought that's a bit of a long way away. You won't see that over there, will you? But anyway. This Marty, oh by the way, I have skimmed that, and already there's more come back, but we'll skim again. Oh, actually, before I tell you about Marty, you can find a recipe for this. I mean, I've told you the recipe, so you don't need to go looking, do you? And if you're an ignorant peasant, I was going to say like me, but I'm not an ignorant peasant because I can read. The former curry, which I believe you've heard about before. Apparently, I've got a counterpart in the future, and he's told you all about that. So you ought to know about that. So I just finished off my snacks, still got a bit in my teeth. And this was sort of one of the recipes that was in it. But anyway, I mentioned earlier we're going to make some almond milk. And they might say, well, why don't we just put milk in it? Well, you've got to remember, it's $13.90. We don't have electricity. Well, actually I do, because of Marty, but I'll tell you, that's coming in a bit. But we don't have electricity, which apparently you need to use this thing called a fridge. Marty said in the future, you've all got one in your homes. And it will keep your food chilled. So, at the minute, if we want milk, we go out to the cow, we milk it, and we use it straight away. We either straight away cook with it, we drink it, or we make butter or cheese. But the trouble is, it goes off really, really quickly. So, if I said to you, but cook this and I want you to put milk in it, chances are the milk you get is off. Gone sour, gone nasty. And there's a lot of unscrupulous people out there who will say, here go, I've got some milk for you. And you go to use it. Oh, excuse me. My humour's obviously unbalanced and it's producing gas. I digress. The milk, by the time you got it home, even if it was all right in the first place when he sold it to you, it was off. It was probably off when he sold it to you. Or he'd put other things in it. He'd watered it down, he'd put other shit in it, you know, I don't know. So people didn't really use milk in their cooking. Like I say, milk was reserved for something else. So I'll have to skim that again. Get me a little dish here. So instead, what people did, just skim off that stuff come off the top. They used almonds or walnuts, which were available in England. Certainly walnuts. Yeah? And what they did, you ground them up, or you soaked them beforehand and then ground them up in water. And it produced a milky-like substance, which you called milk, or almond milk. Now, Marty did say to me that for a long time, people talked about almond milk. And apparently in the future, a lot of you are going to be like drinking it instead of cow's milk. Because you'll say it's not right to drink cow's milk. Apparently some people won't be able to drink cow's milk. But anyway, that's all completely aside. But what he said is, in the future, this great civilization, the EU, will say, hang on, milk is what cows make, or other mammals. That's a group of creatures that make milk. And he said that's what they'll say that's what true milk is, and what you're making there isn't like that. What you're making, I'm putting that side because every time I leave it on this side, I knock it over. He said what you're making isn't true milk. So apparently, in the future, probably when you see this, you're not allowed to call it almond milk anymore. You have to call it almond drink. But back, I tried to know that. Back here in the 1390, we called it almond milk. And the thing with it was, it didn't need these fridges to keep it fresh, stay fresh for ages. And it had quite a high fat content. So we discovered we can make almond butter and almond cheese from it. So that's what we did. So that we could actually have a milk, as it were, milk product. We used almond milk. So you're going to want, for this recipe, about 240 mils. I still haven't told you why I'm talking about these weird measurements, but I will admit. I think I don't think I told you. EU again. I did tell you. Yeah, about 240, 250 mils of almond milk or almond milk. Bit of a posh one. Okay, hence why I've got my almonds, which I've already ground up. So that's why we're using almond milk. Okay, now I've told you about alekenet. Alekenet was from a plant, from a root of a plant called Alekenet tinctoria. also known as the dyer's alekenet, because people wanted to dye clothing, would use that as for red. Also just called it alekenet. Basically it was a herbaceous flower. Related to the borage family. Borage family? You've probably heard of borage herb, sorry. But Marty said, like I told you, don't use it. So he gave me something. He said, this pot contains a futuristic product. He said that we call food colouring, because you can colour your food with it. He said, use that. Oh, it ain't been opened yet. And there, don't get in it. Oh, look, what's this thing? Oh, look, tear that off. He said, have a few drops of that, and that will turn your food as red as you want. You want it redder? Add a few. Don't go overboard. He said, but this will not make you ill. This will not harm your humans. Well, he was an angel, so I have to believe him. Now, my meat is almost boiled enough. But what I've mentioned so far is what you can eat this with. Now, you can eat it just as it is in the sauce, or you can have it with, like, I don't know, some nice greens that you pick from your garden or the fields surrounding your house. Or you can have it with rice. Now you might think, hang on, this is 13.90, what are you doing with bloody rice? Rice wasn't something that you peasants would have. Oh, excuse me. I think the wine is affecting my gaseous humours, even though you haven't really got gaseous humour. But that's another story. But, actually, while I'm talking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start fishing out that meat, okay? And what we're going to do is just put that meat somewhere where we're going to come back to it, as it were, okay? Because remember I said, I'm going to move that spoon because I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to knock that spoon off. We're going to keep our broth because we're going to use some of that to make our almond milk. I lost my train of thought now. Brilliant. No, totally lost my train of thought. So until I can remember what it was I was saying to you, all we're going to do is fish the meat out, and then I want to keep about 240 mils of this. Now, if you're not happy about using this broth, and why not, okay, then that's because that's made of metal and it's hot. I'll turn the heat off. You can use boiling water, but you can lose a lot of flavour. So what I'm going to do is I'm now just going to collect 240 mil. Remember, this is this futuristic metric system thing, or whatever, I don't from the EU. And I'm going to pour it over the ground almonds that I've got in there, put them in that bowl. I don't know why I didn't put them in there in the first place. I measured out another bowl, and then I just dipped them in here. And then we're going to let them steep for at least 5 minutes. And that will extract that milky goodness, although how are you going to take it milky? Look at the colour of that. But it will extract the milk from that. And then I'm going to show you something that Marty told me and gave me, that you peasants in 1390 will be like, hey, demons have come, demons have come. But you'll find out in a minute. Right, so my broth's in there with me almonds, ground almonds. Okay, and now I'm going to take them onions and I'm going to chuck them in that same pan. And we're now just going to saute them. wipe that down. Now, we just want to get these softened up, okay? I've not put any fat in it or anything like that, okay? Bit of pill, you tat. Now, I mentioned earlier that we're going to want some rice flour, which we haven't used yet. And it's like, hey. And I said about we could use rice as an accompaniment. We knew about rice in 1390, or that it was one of them things that was imported from the East Indies, the Saracens. But obviously it was expensive stuff. So you peasants would have got nowhere near it. Might not even known what it was. But if you were trying to, if you're a bit of a noble guy, a bit raughty, and you want to impress your guests, serve them up something with rice. And they go, fuck me, he must be loaded. He can afford rice. But they also knew that if you ground that up into flour, that just like wheat flour or, you know, other sort of flours like that, you could use it to thicken things. So this sauce is going to be thickened with rice flour, like it said in the recipe. Okay, it said that in the recipe. 1390 says that in the... But anyway, what we're going to do is we're just going to soften that up. We've got our spice mixture, we've got our wine ready, we've got our sugar, we've got our rice flour. And then I've got this thing. This is a fork. And when I showed the priest this one and said, Marty said, in the future, we don't eat with our fingers. We don't necessarily eat with a spoon. We don't eat off a pick. Because until Marty came and told me otherwise, you'd either use a spoon, or you might use a knife and eat off your knife, or you use the pick. This pick's fucking dangerous, I tell you, it's fucking sharp. This fucking knife's as blunt as fork, but this pick, fucking hell, killed something like that. You know, you use it to pick your food up. You probably stab yourself in the gob, you do that. But Marty said, no, in the future, we use forks. It's a bit like a pick, but you've got two prongs, and you can stick it in your meat and eat it that way. In 1390, people didn't use a thing called a fork. But I do, because Marty showed me the way. Me broth and me ground almonds have simmered enough. Now, what we would normally do was I'd probably take my coif off or my shirt and I'd filter it, I'd sieve it through that. But Marty said, in the future, people blend. They use a blender. And instead of like filtering it, they're basically going to pulverise it even more. So it all blends in together. And he said, I've got a present for you, here's a blender. And I said, well, how the bloody hell do I use that? And he said, that's the point. 39, you don't know about electricity, do you? I said, what? Electricity? What are you talking? What are you talking about? He said, never mind. He said, I'll get a dock. He said, and he'll sort you out with solar power, eh? He said, don't worry about it. He said, and basically you push that in a thing in the wall that he's going to make for you, or put in there for you. Hang on, just got to stir my onion. And he said, and then what you do is you put that in there, and you push that button, and he said there's little knives in the bottom there. And he said what they'll do is they'll pulverise what's left of that almond and make it go everywhere. And he said it's smooth it all out. It's called hand blender. So you use them everywhere. In fact, you can get hand blenders, you can get blenders that are like, sit on the side. You don't hold in your hand. You see, in the future, they use them everywhere. I said, is this the EU again? He said, no, nothing to do with EU. He said the EU might have something to say about the electrics, trickery. But he said they got all to do with everything else. So he said you carry on making lots of bleeding noise and blend it all up. Or you can do what you used to do, is sieve it through your shirt. But you lose a lot of the elements. So I said, oh, okay, then I'll give this a go. So I'm just going to blend all that up. So now what you do is you take that almond milk, you know, it does actually look milky. I thought it would be a pretty funny colour after that broth. And I'll pour that in there with the onions. Okay. And then we just want, now apparently he said to me, that's what everybody does in the future. But at that point he said, I've got to go back to the future and I've got to take Doc with me. Even though I don't really know Doc, because Doc just did his trickery for me. And he said, there you go, that'll help you. And I said, oh, thanks very much. So I can use it for a blender. What else do I fucking use it for, you dozy bastard? And he went, oh, never mind, I ain't got time, I've got to get back to the future. So all we're going to do now is we're just going to heat that milk through, but we've got to be careful because that almond milk could split. That's a little bit it separates. We don't want that happening. Oh yes, must be almond. So I'm just going to heat that through, and then of course we want our spices, our wine, our sugar, our rice flour, and this magical liquid, food colouring. And I need a swig of this. Right, that's starting to boil now, so at this point I'm going to chuck that flour in there. And now, like I said, we're not making a stew, we're making like a thick coating sauce. I mean, if it gets too thick, that's all right. I'll turn that heat down a bit. Because we can always add liquid to it, more wine or water, to make it thinner. But you can see it is quite thick at the minute. But like I said, when we come to eat it, the meat that is, the meat wants to be coated in this, not swimming in it. Okay. But we want to cook this for a little bit, otherwise it'll taste floury. Now, at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm adding all them spices. Remember, we want this to have that nice flavour of the East. Where then dodgy Saracens come from. I say dodgy because obviously us Christians here in England, you know what we're like. You've got to be English. You've got to be Christian. When you're not, well, we don't tolerate you. Because that's how tolerant we are as English people. And Marty said to me, one of the last things he said to me is, don't worry, because in the future it gets worse. People become less tolerant of everybody else. He said, but don't you let that worry you. He said, because you'll be long bloody dead by then. I said, can't you make me live till I can see the future? He said, you will see the future. Tomorrow's the bloody future. What more do you want? And then he popped off in his magical carriage. Drawyn, something he called it. His mate Doc, whoever he was like the driver. Anyway, that's gone in there. Now I'm going to add the sugar, and I'm going to add that wine. Okay, and we're now just going to mix all that in, and this is where we're better see whether we need to add more wine, which would be a bit difficult because it runs with the red wine, or some water. And you can see it's starting to look a little, well, no, you can see that, a little bit red, but not quite enough yet. So this is where I'm just going to take a little bit. Look at that. Magical device. I'm going to take a little bit of this food colouring, a bit more than that. Because to make it look authentic, I'm not sitting there trying to get a powder out. I am, you silly bastard. I thought it was bloody liquid. I can go in the bin, and I think that will do. And we're just going to mix all that in, and that's starting to make it look a bit redder. And then we're going to let that cook through a little bit. Before we decide whether we need to water it a bit, which I don't know if we do, and then we will reintroduce the meat. Okay, I added a little bit more water, okay, just to make it a little bit runnier, and now we're going to put the meat back in there. And what we're doing now is we're just mixing that meat in there and warming that meat back up again, okay. And like I said, what we want to do is coat the meat, excuse me, I think it's a bit red. I mean, you know what I say, when they said about we want it red, like a Saracen looks, a reddy brown colour, I'm sure none of the Saracens look this red, but anyway. So, I'm just going to warm this through. Make sure the meat's all coated, and then we'll be ready to serve it. Now, I said to you, you could have rice with it, you could have greens with it. What I didn't say is you could have bread with it. A nice, great, big, thick slice of warm bread, or, as more commonly we would have, because we couldn't afford things like plates and bowls and things like that when we were peasants. I'm not a peasant. Remember that. But if I was, pretend I'm a peasant. So one of the other things we would do is have what we call a trencher. Now a trencher was normally like a big slab of bread, and it might be a bit past it, might be a bit dry and a bit hard, but we don't care about that, because what you do is sometimes you would like take your loaf that gone a bit dry, take the top out and rip out a bit of middle, and then you put something like this in the middle, and of course that meant you've got like a purpose-built bowl or plate that contained everything, but equally after you'd eaten the contents, all them juices, all them sauces had like softened up that bread. Then you think, well, actually now I can eat that, I can eat my plate. So that's what a trencher was. So you could do it that way, but we're not. We're just going to have the meat like this. So, like I say, I'm just going to make sure that's all nicely warm through, all nicely coated, and then we'll serve it up. So there you go. your Bruet Sarcenes. So let's try a bit. Okay, so interesting. I wouldn't say them spices come, well, they're not overpowering. I think the main thing is the almonds. Even though I use Marty's device to blend it all up, you still got that, you got the meat. It's meat, but quite while them nobles get a bit excited about this dish, I don't know. I would say nothing special. It's flavourful. It's meat. I get the onion. I get some of the spice. Well, there you go. Next time he says make it for me, I might make it for him, but I don't know if I'll bother eating it. Oh, this fork's a bit funny. I can't pick that bit up. Ui, I thought it was meant to make life easier. Well, I can't pick that up. Where my pick gone? Anyway, Bruet Sarcenes, 39.